Every birthday, my siblings turned my life into a joke. They once even put a cockroach in my cake. I never forgot that one. So on my brother's 30th, I handed him a gift bag worth $10,000. Or so he thought. Wait, this isn't real, he muttered. I smiled. Now you know what it feels like. His fiancée's reaction? Priceless. Growing up, I never looked forward to my birthday. Some kids count down the days, plan their own parties, or hint at what presents they want. I never bothered. My birthday wasn't a day of celebration. It was an annual event for humiliation. The one time of the year when I knew, without a doubt, that my older siblings, Tyler and Bianca, would make a spectacle out of me. The first few years, I didn't understand. As a kid, I thought it was normal. Maybe all older siblings treated their younger ones like some kind of living, breathing joke. It started off small, trick candles that wouldn't blow out, a birthday song stretched out for an unbearable length, or hiding my gifts so I thought no one had bought me anything. At 7, it was silly. At 10, it was annoying. At 12, I started dreading the day entirely. They got more creative as we grew up. Bianca once convinced our uncle to pretend he had no idea who I was. He played along so well that I started questioning myself. Had I imagined years of seeing him at Christmas and Thanksgiving? Had I really been that forgettable? The laughter that followed made my face burn with shame, but I laughed along anyway. What else could I do? By the time I was 15, I had learned to expect the worst, and they didn't disappoint. That year, Bianca spread mayonnaise over my birthday cake instead of frosting. I took one bite and gagged in front of everyone, the room exploding with laughter. The next year, Tyler took it further. He put my phone number in a Craigslist ad, saying I was offering free foot massages. I got texts from strangers for days, asking me about prices, appointment times, and, worst of all, what my technique was. But nothing compared to my 21st birthday. That was the year they put a cockroach in my cake. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a case of bad luck. It was intentional, planned, thought out. I had just finished blowing out the candles. The room was warm with the glow of the tiny flames, everyone watching as I took the knife and pressed it into the cake. The first slice lifted easily, the frosting smooth and untouched. Then I saw it. At first, I thought I imagined it. A tiny movement, a flicker of something dark against the creamy white frosting. But when I blinked, it was still there. And then it moved. A cockroach, crawling out of the cake. It twitched its antennae, stretched its legs, then scurried forward toward my hand. I dropped the knife. A sharp, metallic clatter echoed through the room. Someone gasped, but it wasn't out of horror. It was out of anticipation. And then, all at once, the laughter started. Bianca doubled over, gripping her stomach. Oh my God, that was perfect. Tyler was in tears. Your face. Holy shit, your face. I sat there, frozen. My stomach churned, my skin crawling with the phantom sensation of tiny legs skittering over my hands. I heard my mother chuckle softly. My father shook his head with amusement. An uncle clapped his hands together, shaking his head as if to say, kids will be kids. No one defended me. No one asked if I was okay. I spent the next hour locked in the bathroom, staring at the reflection of someone I no longer recognized. That was the night something inside me shifted. I knew then that they would never stop. That to them, I was never going to be anything more than a joke. And if no one else was going to do anything about it, then I would. I promised myself, one day, I'd get even. 9 years passed. I had spent most of my 20s distancing myself from my family. Not cutting them off, but keeping just enough space to breathe. I have my own life now. A stable job, my own place, a small but close-knit group of friends who actually treated me with respect. I had learned, painfully, that family wasn't always synonymous with love. Tyler, on the other hand, was thriving in his own way. He had a high-paying job in finance, a fancy condo in Chicago, and, somehow, a sweet, kind, and completely undeserving fiancée, Eva. She had no idea what kind of man she was about to marry. When I received the invitation to his 30th birthday party, I knew I had a choice. I could ignore it, stay home, and let the years continue to pass in quiet resentment. Or I could do something about it. I chose the latter. It took months of planning. I thought of every prank they had pulled on me, every moment of public humiliation, every time they had laughed at my expense. And then I designed the perfect payback. By the time the party arrived, everything was set. It was held in an upscale restaurant, packed with people, friends, coworkers, family. I arrived fashionably late, making my way through the crowd with a sleek, matte black gift bag in hand. People noticed immediately. Whoa, did you actually bring gift? I had never given them anything before. Not after my 21st. Not after realizing they didn't deserve it. But tonight, I made an exception. Tyler's eyes lit up when he saw the bag. He pulled out the first item, a crisp, elegant envelope. Inside, a printed receipt, a $10,000 wire transfer to his bank account. He stared at it, speechless. Next, he pulled out a Rolex box. He flipped it open. Inside was a gleaming silver watch. Murmurs spread, through the crowd. Someone whistled. Damn, that's insane. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for the final item. A small, leather-bound booklet. The title embossed in gold, A Life Well Played. He opened it. The first page was blank. So was the second. And the third. He frowned, flipped through faster. His face changed, confusion morphing into something darker. His fingers tightened around the cover. What the hell is this? I didn't answer right away. I let the silence settle, let the weight of the moment sink in. Then I leaned in slightly and in a calm, measured voice said, Now you know what it feels like. His face twisted. What? I reached over, picked up the receipt, and turned it over. The fine print was clear. Void if the recipient is an a-hole. A hush fell over the table. Eva was the first to break the silence. She looked at him, eyes narrowing. Wait, what does that mean? He scoffed. It's nothing, just a dumb joke. But I didn't let him escape. It's what you always said, right? My voice was steady, even as my heart pounded in my chest. Just a joke. Just harmless fun. Realization dawned. His face darkened. And for the first time in his life, Tyler had no words. A thick silence settled over the table. The weight of my words hung in the air, pressing against everyone like the heavy humidity before a thunderstorm. I could see the exact moment it hit Tyler. The slow unraveling of certainty in his eyes, the subtle way his jaw tightened, the twitch of his fingers against the empty pages of the leather-bound booklet. For years, he had controlled the narrative. He had been the one laughing, the one in charge, the one who always had a comeback. But now, there was nowhere to hide. Eva was still staring at him, her confusion deepening. Tyler, what is he talking about? Bianca let out a sharp breath, covering her mouth, trying, and failing, to suppress a laugh. Oh, this is gold. But Eva wasn't amused. She turned to me, her brows drawn together. What does this mean? I didn't look at Tyler. I didn't need to. I kept my eyes on Eva as I spoke, my voice steady, clear, calm. Did he ever tell you about my birthdays? Her frown deepened. No, of course he didn't. I nodded, as if I had expected that. When we were kids, he and Bianca used to pull pranks on me every year. Small things at first. Harmless. Annoying, but whatever. I glanced at Tyler, saw his throat move as he swallowed. Then they got worse. Humiliating. Public. I let the words sit for a moment before adding. The worst one was my 21st birthday. They put a cockroach in my cake. A flicker of something passed over Eva's face. First disbelief, then realization, then something darker. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. She turned back to Tyler. You did what? Tyler scoffed, shaking his head as if this was all ridiculous. It was a joke. Jesus, it was years ago. A joke. Her voice had gone quiet. Too quiet. I saw the slight shift in his posture, like a man trying to backpedal without moving his feet. It wasn't that serious. It was just a prank. The table was eerily still. A few people shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. The murmurs that had once filled the room had died down, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable tension. I turned to Bianca. What do you think, Bianca? Was it just a prank? Bianca exhaled, shaking her head, still grinning like she was enjoying the show. I mean, yeah, it was a prank, but it was messed up. She tilted her glass toward me in a mock toast. I gotta give you credit, though. This is genius. Tyler shot her a glare, but she just shrugged. What? You can't be mad. This is exactly what we used to do to him. And let's be real, you would have loved this if it was happening to someone else. That was the thing about Bianca. She could be cruel, but at least she was honest about it. Tyler, on the other hand, was squirming, desperate to rewrite history. He turned back to me, his voice tight with frustration. So what? You planned this whole thing just to embarrass me? Just to get back at me? I didn't answer. I just watched him. His irritation deepened. Jesus, you're so damn petty. You really held on to this for 9 years. I let out a soft, humorless chuckle. Funny how time works, isn't it? 9 years doesn't feel like much when you're the one laughing. But when you're the one humiliated, I tilted my head slightly. It sticks. His jaw clenched. I could feel the eyes on us, the weight of the moment pressing down. This wasn't how he thought the night would go. He had walked into his 30th birthday, expecting admiration, gifts, an easy celebration where he would be the center of attention. Instead, he was standing in front of everyone, exposed, unable to spin his way out of it. Eva still hadn't spoken. She was staring at him, but it wasn't the kind of stare people gave when they were waiting for an explanation. It was the kind of stare people gave when they had already decided something. Tyler must have felt it too, because for the first time that night, I saw something that almost resembled fear flickering across his face. He turned to her, lowering his voice. Eva, come on. You know this is bullshit. She blinked once, slowly, before speaking. No, she said. I really don't. Tyler's entire body tensed. He let out a sharp breath through his nose, then turned back to me. All right, you made your point. His voice was clipped, controlled. Can we drop it now? I leaned back slightly. Sure, we can drop it. I gestured toward the empty booklet in his hands. But I'd keep that if I were you. Maybe one day, you'll fill it in with something worth remembering. He slammed it shut. For the first time in my life, I saw it. The realization. The awareness that for once he was the one being laughed at. The one everyone was whispering about. The one who had to sit in the uncomfortable silence and feel the weight of his own choices. And he hated it. Tyler exhaled sharply through his nose, his fingers tightening around the booklet, as if he were debating whether to throw it across the table. But he didn't. He just stood there, jaw locked, a muscle twitching near his temple. His carefully constructed image, the successful, confident older brother, had cracked, and he knew it. Worse, everyone else knew it, too. Bianca was still smirking, sipping her drink like she was watching a particularly entertaining reality show. Some of Tyler's friends were avoiding eye contact, pretending to be deeply interested in their plates. A few of them, the ones who had probably been on the receiving end of his arrogance before, looked like they were enjoying the moment a little too much. But it was Eva's silence that held the most weight. She wasn't looking at him anymore. She was staring down at the table, fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass, her expression unreadable. Tyler must have noticed, because his tone softened, taking on that careful, controlled edge people use when they're trying to do damage control. Eva, come on. You know me. You know this isn't. She finally looked up, and the expression on her face made him stop mid-sentence. I don't know you, she said quietly. Tyler blinked. What? Eva shook her head slightly, her brows drawing together. I don't know you, she repeated. Because the person I know, the person I thought I knew, wouldn't have done something like that. She let out a breath, almost like she was laughing at herself. I mean, a cockroach? And a cake? You humiliated your own brother on his birthday? Tyler's irritation returned, his hand swiping through the air. It was years ago. We were kids. Eva's expression didn't change. You were 21. The words landed with a dull, heavy weight. Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since the conversation had started, he had nothing to say. The restaurant felt too quiet, like everyone was holding their breath. Plates clinked, glasses shifted against the tablecloth, but the space between the words stretched too long, too tense. Bianca let out a low whistle, finally breaking the silence. Damn, she muttered under her breath. Tyler shot her a glare, his patience clearly worn thin. Are you enjoying this? She didn't hesitate. A little, yeah. His jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. He knew better than to pick a fight with Bianca in front of an audience. She had never cared about keeping the peace. She just liked watching things unfold. Tyler turned back to me, the frustration evident in the stiff set of his shoulders. Fine. You made your point. Happy. I took a sip of my drink before answering. No, I said simply. But at least now, you know what it feels like. His nostrils flared slightly, but he didn't respond. He knew there was nothing he could say. Nothing that would undo the moment. Nothing that would make the weight of his own actions disappear. He had spent years laughing at my expense. Years thinking that as long as he wasn't the one suffering, it didn't really matter. But tonight, for the first time, he was the one with all eyes on him. And he hated it. Eva pushed her chair back slightly, the legs scraping softly against the floor. The sound wasn't loud, but it might as well have been a gunshot with the way Tyler's head snapped toward her. I need some air, she murmured. Tyler reached for her arm, his voice quieter now. Eva. She stepped back before he could touch her. I just need a minute. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the floor as she made her way toward the exit. Tyler hesitated for half a second before following her, his movements stiff, controlled. He didn't look at me as he passed. I watched them go, watching the way Eva didn't glance back. Bianca let out a low chuckle. Well, she mused, finishing off her drink. That was unexpected. I didn't say anything, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was joking. Tyler pushed past a few people on his way toward the exit, his movements sharp, tense. Eva was already outside by the time he reached the door, standing near the curb with her arms crossed, her gaze unfocused. I couldn't hear what he was saying to her, but I could see it, the way he leaned in slightly, his hands gesturing in a controlled, deliberate way, trying to explain, trying to smooth things over. Eva didn't move at first. She just stood there listening. Then, after a long moment, she took a step back. I didn't need to hear the words to know what was happening. Tyler's shoulders stiffened. He said something else, more insistent this time, but she only shook her head. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. She didn't go back into the restaurant. She just left. Tyler stood there for a moment, staring after her, his hands still slightly raised as if he could physically pull the moment back and reshape it into something else. Then, slowly his hands lowered. When he turned around, his face was carefully blank. But his movements were different as he came back inside. He wasn't walking with that usual air of confidence, the casual arrogance that had always made him seem untouchable. His steps were slower, heavier, like he had just been hit with something he wasn't quite ready to process. I turned my attention back to my drink as he approached the table. Bianca, of course, didn't even bother pretending not to stare. She tilted her head slightly, watching him with an amused curiosity. That looked intense, she mused. Tyler ignored her, pulling out his chair with more force than necessary before sitting down. He reached for his drink, his grip so tight around the glass that I half expected it to crack. The table had gone quiet again, the air around us noticeably different now. People were still talking in the background, laughing, eating, drinking, but at our table, there was a tension that hadn't been there before. A few of Tyler's friends exchanged uncertain glances. Some of them looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats like they weren't sure whether to pretend they hadn't just witnessed the whole thing or acknowledge it outright. One of them, a guy I vaguely recognized from past gatherings, cleared his throat awkwardly. So, he gestured toward the gift bag, still sitting on the table. That was, something. Tyler didn't respond. Bianca smirked slightly, swirling the last of her drink in her glass. You know, she said, her voice light, almost conversational, I don't think I've ever seen you this quiet before. Tyler exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at anyone. For the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. And that, more than anything, told me exactly how much tonight had gotten to him. I watched as he picked up the leather-bound booklet, turning it over in his hands. His fingers brushed over the embossed title, A Life Well Played. His expression was unreadable. Then, without a word, he set it down, pushed back his chair, and stood up. I didn't ask where he was going. I already knew. Tyler stood there for a moment, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. He looked around at the expectant faces, Bianca's smug amusement, his friend's barely contained curiosity, my silent, unwavering stare. His jaw worked like he wanted to say something, to throw out one last attempt at control, but the words never came. Instead, he shook his head, let out a bitter exhale, and stormed off toward the exit. I watched as he disappeared through the restaurant doors, moving fast, his posture stiff with frustration. For a few moments, no one spoke. Then Bianca, never one to let a moment go to waste, exhaled dramatically and leaned back in her chair. Phew, that was tense. I ignored her, my eyes still fixed on the door. A minute passed. 2. Then my phone buzzed. I pulled it out of my pocket and glanced at the screen. Eva, can we talk? I raised an eyebrow. I wasn't expecting that. Without replying, I slipped my phone back in my jacket and stood up. I'm heading out, I said simply. Bianca gave me a knowing look. Oh, this just keeps getting better. I ignored her and walked toward the exit. Outside, the night air was crisp, a sharp contrast to the warmth of the restaurant. Across the street, Eva was standing near a quiet alleyway, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Tyler was nowhere in sight. I made my way over, stopping a few feet away. You okay? Eva let out a humorless laugh. That's what I was about to ask you. I didn't respond. She studied me for a moment, then sighed. I had no idea, she admitted. Not about any of it. I nodded. I figured. She ran a hand through her hair, exhaling slowly. I feel like an idiot. I tilted my head slightly. Why? She let out a dry, bitter chuckle. Because I almost married him. That wasn't surprising. If anything, it confirmed what I had suspected the moment she left the restaurant. This wasn't just about the birthday pranks. This was about who Tyler really was. She looked at me again, her expression shifting slightly. He never talked about you much, she admitted. I always thought that was weird. But now I get it. I said nothing. A heavy pause stretched between us before she spoke again. I broke things off, she said quietly. That got my attention. Just now, she nodded. He tried to explain, tried to downplay it, but she shook her head, her lips pressing together. I don't know. Something about the way he reacted tonight. It just clicked for me. The way he tried to brush it off. The way he looked embarrassed, but not sorry. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She sighed. I think I knew, deep down, that he had a mean streak. I just ignored it, or thought it wasn't that bad. She glanced at me, her expression rueful. But watching him tonight, seeing how easily he could just laugh at someone else's pain. She exhaled sharply. I can't be with someone like that. For a moment, I just stood there, letting her words settle. Then I nodded once. Good. She let out a short laugh, shaking her head. That's all you've got to say? I shrugged. It's your life. She studied me again, her gaze thoughtful. Then, slowly she smiled. You knew this would happen, didn't you? I met her eyes. I didn't answer, but she already knew. She exhaled, shaking her head with something almost like admiration. Damn, she muttered. That was good. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to, because the revenge had already played out exactly the way I wanted. Tyler had spent years tearing me down, making me feel like a joke. Tonight, I took everything from him, his pride, his confidence, and the woman who had been willing to spend her life with him. And the best part? I never had to lift a finger. He did it to himself.